This electronic lecture is directed to third year Department of English, Part 2. In the previous lecture, Scene 1 of Act 1, we get introduced to the main characters. In this lecture, we follow up with the character of Tony and we get introduced to even more characters. At the opening of the scene, we see Tony sits at the table in the Three Pigeons, the ale house, and he is surrounded by his friends, the villagers. They asked him to perform a song. Tony complies with their requests, and his performance was original and praiseworthy. So they admired the song that he sang. Then we see that his friends drag Tony's father into the conversation. They talked about him. He was a squire, and he was an affluent man. He enjoyed the variety of possessions that he had. He had objects, animals, and women. And we see here that Tony promises them not to be as bastard. He actually promises them to be a better person than his father was. And we see that Tony is looking forward for something that is going to completely change his life, which is coming of age. When Tony comes of age, he will be able to gain his fortune back from his mother, and he will be able to get married to any woman he likes. He likes in particular a country girl called Beth. And here the whole point of coming of age and marrying is very significant, because his possessions or his fortune is at the custody of his mother, and his mother is really a controlling woman. She wants him to get married to her niece, because her niece, Constance Novel, that we get to know a little bit about her in the previous lecture, is a woman with fortune, and her fortune in jewels. So she wants this fortune to stay in the family, if that makes any sense. So Tony rebels against both of her strategies, keeping his fortune as well as obliging him to get married to someone that he doesn't actually like. Now we see that the landlord comes in and announces the arrival of two gentlemen. And here we see how clever Tony is. From the get-go, he had the intuition that one of these gentlemen is the one expected to come this night to propose to his sister, Kate. And we see that Tony is actually revengeful in a very humorous way. Like, it is not bloody revengeful, but humorously revengeful. Let's read this turn by Tony. Tony Solis means talking to himself. Father-in-law has been calling me whelp and hound this half year. Now, if I pleased, I could be so revenged on the old Grambletonian. Grambletonian is an obsolete word, which means being involved in politics, especially for a small village or a small town. But then I am afraid of what? I will soon be worth the 1,500 a year, and let him frighten me out of that if he can. Tony is revengeful in here. Tony receives Mr. Marlowe and so after asking his friends to leave him to receive Mr. Hastings and Mr. Marlowe, he is left alone. He receives them, and for the first time we get introduced to Mr. Marlowe and Mr. Hastings. We knew few information about them from the previous scene, but we haven't got the chance to meet them in person until now. So Tony informs them that they have lost their way because he asked them if they know where they come from, if they know where they came from, or if they know where they are heading, and they actually don't. So he informs them that they have lost their way. So he begins then to question them about this Mr. Hardcastle that they would like to meet. Actually, Tony here is very tricky. He pretends that he doesn't know Mr. Hardcastle, and he begins to give them descriptions, or whether his description fits into Mr. Hardcastle that they are looking for or not. And this is so clever. So he says, is that Mr. Hardcastle that you are looking for? Is that whimsical, old-fashioned, and ugly face with an ugly face? And he begins also to describe his family, that he has a daughter and a son. But he actually twists the description of his family. So he describes Kate as talkative, unkempt, and awkward. And he describes the son himself as pretty well-bred and agreeable, to which they disagreed. We have this extract from their dialogue. Hastings, we have not seen the gentleman, but he has the family you mentioned. The daughter, a tall, trespassing, trolloping, talkative maypole. Tony this is Tony talking. The son, pretty well-bred, agreeable youth that everybody is fond of. Marlowe, our information differs in this. The daughter is said to be well-bred and beautiful. The son, an awkward booby reared up and spoiled at his mother's apron. Please pay attention to how beautiful this descriptive phrase is. Spoiled at his mother's apron. String. Tony describes the way to Mr. Hardcastle as boggy, dangerous, and dirty. So he is trying to what? To put them off. To make it even, to make it hard for them to insist on meeting Mr. Hardcastle tonight. So he winks upon the landlord. The landlord actually, very funny, knows every trick of Tony, and he cooperates without anything in return. And this is actually a real friendship. Anyway, the landlord gives them a very complicated route. So finally they succeeded in putting them off the journey. So Tony suggests that they are going to stay at, Marlowe asks the landlord if he can stay at this inn tonight. But then they didn't agree on the location where they can stay, where they can reside. So they decided to leave off. Not to leave off. They decided to leave. So Tony suggests that if they head to the hall, they can find a luxurious inn on there. And this luxurious inn is owned by an innkeeper that pretends to be a gentleman. And this is really clever, but at the same time so mean, because he is leading them to Mr. Hardcastle's mansion, but he puts the idea in their heads that this is actually not a mansion. This is a luxurious inn. Okay, and one of the critics says that it is a real incident in Goldsmith's life. I don't know. Okay, so this is the trick. This is the device in here. He leads them to think that Mr. Hardcastle's mansion is a luxurious inn, and when they go there, they act accordingly. They believed Tony, and they act as if this really were a luxurious inn. Okay, so they are deceived by Tony. And here I want you to pay attention to this, because we are going to talk about device, disguise, and deception so much. I said in the first lecture that when we talk about comedy, all subgenres of comedy, we can find devices, deception, and disguise. So here the important thing is that, okay, before I talk about this, let's define device. You know that the word device means a tool, but here it has another meaning in English, a second meaning, which is a plan, a method, or a trick with a particular aim. So what concerns us in here is that device is a trick. Device is a trick that aims at accomplishing something, okay, at deceiving others. So the word device means a trick, and with that meaning comes deception, because the execution of a device involves deceiving others, involves deception. Here what is really important: this device is a primary device, like the device that is performed by Tony Lumpkin in scene 2 of Act 1 is a primary device, and it is going to be multiplied throughout the play. What does that mean? It means without this device, without this deception that is performed by Tony, there would be no play. Without Tony's trick, without Tony's tricking Marlowe and Hastings into believing that Mr. Hardcastle's house is an inn, there wouldn't be a play, because that is the point around which the whole plot, the whole comic plot is built. Okay, that is very important. And the other important thing is that this device is going to be proliferated, if I may use this word. I mean, it is going to be prolonged, extended, continued, and kept up by other characters, because in Act 2 we see that Hastings is going to know that this is actually, that they have been deceived by Tony, but he is not going to tell Marlowe that they are deceived. What does that mean? It means that he wants to continue Tony's device, Tony's deception. And in Act 3, this character, Miss Hastings, Miss Hardcastle, Kate, is also going to know that actually Marlowe is deceived. That is why he acts as awkwardly with her father. That is why he seems very impertinent, very impudent. He's actually not. He is just thinking that where he is at is an inn. And according to that, she also continues Tony's trick, Tony's deception, and she disguises as a barmaid. So what? We have a primary device performed by Tony, and it is proliferated, it is multiplied by other characters. Why? Because without this, we are not going to have the plot, and we are not going to see the plot developed. And without this, the readers are not going to really be interested for a long time in the whole story. So this chain of deception. This chain of devices sparks interest in the readers, and this is actually so important as far as the response to the comedy is concerned.